Welcome to Play Pause Turn. In this podcast, we discuss all things to do with TV, films, games and literature. We give our thoughts on the media we've been enjoying, old or new, and commenting on anything topical. Hi, I'm John, and I'm joined by Alex, Bobby and Amy tonight. We're going to be discussing the HBO TV series The Last of Us. Hello everybody, how are you doing?
Good, thanks.
All good.
Was that rhetorical?
Yes.
Oh.
We're not infected.
That's good. Well, you slightly are, aren't you, Alex?
I'm a little infected.
Yeah. What's going on here? I can see a tail coming out of one of the feeds.
Yeah, I'm a bit infected.
Oh, bless. Okay, so you've got a companion, but it's not a small girl with a backpack.
No, that's right.
So we're going to be discussing the series The Last of Us, and obviously the usual thing, if you've not seen all the episodes, just come back to this podcast when you have. We're going to be spoiling all the episodes. I'm assuming that all the hosts here have seen the entire series.
We have.
Everyone's
Yes,
there.
sir.
Yes.
Good. So before we go on to talk about the series, can I just see how much of The Last of Us has all the hosts experienced? Because this is an adaptation from a video game. Bobby, Alex and Amy, have you played the video game to the end?
I have not played the video game at all. So I came in purely on the TV side.
Sure.
I did a couple of chapters and then I stopped.
And Bobby, how about you?
So yes, I have played the game multiple times, but only up to where Joel is with Ellie and they're trying to find their way out of that first resistancy type place, and there's a chain link fence and I couldn't get past it, so I gave up, and now I've just started all over again. But I'm very sort of up with the game because I watch other people playing it on YouTube and stuff like that. Which
is something you quite often do, which is fine. You know, busy people and not much time to get things done, so that's fine. I think I've played it 5 times now.
Wow.
I played it when it came out in 2013 on the PS3. I played that twice. I played it twice, the remaster, when it came out on the PS4, with the extra Left Behind DLC, which is one of the episodes from the series, in fact. And then a friend of mine who works at Sony gifted me a token, the code for the PS5 version.
Nice.
And I actually played the PS5 version in sync with the series. So I would play up till the end of each episode in the game with the TV series, so I could compare them.
Cool.
And that was a really interesting way of doing it. It worked really well. And it also kind of showed you how tight the series is. But we'll come to that later on. Okay, so Bobby and I can discuss a little bit about where the series kind of diverges and stays in sync with the game. First of all, I'm going to go ladies first. Amy, what was your general feeling about the show overall? Did you enjoy it?
I really enjoyed it, way more than I thought I was going to. I tuned in because everyone else was going to tune in, and I knew it was going to be a massive thing. But I did just think, it's just going to be another zombie thing. And I wasn't that into, not Left 4 Dead. What's the big zombie thing that was on the telly that other fellow had teachers in? There you go. I wasn't that into that. I thought, just another one of them. But I was so pleased by how they did it. I really enjoyed it.
Excellent. How about you, Alex?
Yeah, no, I just knew it was a really high caliber TV show, and having not got through the game, I wanted to see to the end. So yeah, that really made me want to watch.
So do you think you'll complete the game now you've seen the series, or do you think it will
stop you from playing the game? I will give it a go. I'm a bit busy right now because I've got Hogwarts and Horizon to do, but once I get a space, I will do it.
And how about you, Bobby? What were your feelings on the series?
It was brilliant. It really was. It was better than I expected. I thought the casting was excellent, and I had doubts about it when I heard the series first announced and I saw the first trailer for it. But yeah, Bella Ramsey and Pedro Pascal just knocked it out of the park, and the rest of the supporting cast were excellent as well. I was really pleased that in the opening sequence that they were really faithful. I mean, they were so faithful to the game. And for me, I was trying to explain it to Carolina the other day, but the opening to The Last of Us is probably the most emotionally impactful of any video game that I've ever played. And I've played a lot of video games in my life. And they lost none of that impact with how they did it in the show. I'm so glad they stayed true to that. And I think that staying true to that is what would have hooked a lot of people in who knew nothing about the game coming into it, because it is just such a compelling opening sequence.
Having seen Neil Druckmann talk about the show and his trepidation about making it, his biggest concern was he wanted to make a TV series for people who had never played the game, for people who had played the game, and make it a kind of a quality experience for both those groups of people. And so, yes, there are plenty of nods to the game in if you look very carefully in all the scenes. But that's not something that you would ever worry about missing if you weren't new to the franchise. I agree with you, and the only thing that I think would make the experience a bit better for Alex and Amy is, knowing what's going to happen. You've got that kind of emotional build up before it happens, and this the scene with Sarah being shot by the soldier, the scene with Sam and Henry. And obviously the ending, and knowing what's going to happen to Tess and so on. That I knew it was going to come, but I think they dealt with it so well. And I would say, and without any hyperbole here, this is the best TV series I've ever seen in my life. And I'm pretty biased. I'm pretty invested here, but. We can go into it a bit more in depth in the rest of the podcast, but I'm really, really happy. But there's a bit of relief here too, Bobby, that this is a very good adaptation, because it could have gone horribly wrong. It's definitely the best video game adaptation ever made. So, in terms of the game, Bobby, what did you have any concerns about how, or did you have any thoughts about how it did differ from the game? Did you think it actually added to it, or do you think it took it away?
I think it added to it.
Yeah.
It's a weird one for me though, John, because I've only played through probably not even 15% of the game.
Yeah.
So I come at it from an interesting sort of point of view, where, the sort of first couple of episodes, I was really sort of like, oh, how are they going to change it from the game and all of that? And I was comparing. And then after that, I could forget about it and just kind of enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
So Sam, that whole thing with those two, I didn't know what was going to happen. I had no idea. So the emotional punch of that, where he says, that in truth he'd never actually shot a gun before, and then the irony is the first time he uses it is to kill his own brother.
Yeah.
And the whole sequence with the Etch-a-Sketch between Ellie and the kid, and the fact that he knew that he was infected, will you stay up with me, etc., etc., and the kind of that we got the clue in his eyes, because when he was looking out the window at his reflection, there was that little flash of yellow in his eyeballs.
Yeah.
And even Carolina, she was so invested in this series. She and you guys and Amy know how cynical she can get about stuff. Like she's either in it or she's not. And she was 100% on the train for this. She was so disappointed when it ended. And she was just saying, like, when is season 2? When is season 2? When is season 2? And for me, that was even more satisfying than the satisfaction I got to see somebody that has got no investment in the video game whatsoever. Zero, zip, nada. She absolutely was on the ride for this, and she thought it was one of the best things that she's seen on television as well.
I haven't yet. I've convinced Becca to come to watch it with me. She hates zombies and horror films. She won't watch them. But I'm, again, something about this that changes from the game. A lot of the game, Amy, is you as a character playing as Joel, mostly fighting quite a lot of zombies. A lot of the scenes where you progress between these episodes is getting through and stealthily finding ways of getting past or taking out the zombies. And I think they did a very good job here of not having that in this series. Basically, this is all the cutscenes, but with extra detail. And it's a really interesting way of looking at it, because you said at the beginning of the podcast, didn't you, Amy? You were a bit worried about it being like The Walking Dead, not the zombies.
Yeah, and it was really nice that it was a really fully formed story. And one of the things that I really loved, I'm going to kind of hold on to it a bit because I'm sure we'll come on to it later. But there was a certain part during the series where they gave so much time, rightfully, over to character development, and it's time that we just don't get to see in any other series. And I was so grateful for it. I was in tears by the end of that particular episode.
Episode 3
sure
you're talking about, I presume.
Yeah.
We'll come to that definitely.
Yeah, I really, really enjoyed it. But going back to it being, roots of it being a computer game, there were certain points in it that I sat and went, oh, this is very computer gamey. Like when someone's sitting on a horse and you hear this, Joel, look out! And then suddenly 3 people come out and they take turns in having a go. And certainly I think in the last episode, there was a lot of fighting that went on that was very computer gamey.
Yeah.
Which I'm assuming was a very accurate reflection of the game. But as for the game itself, unless it's got a special button combo that allows you to hide in a corner and rock and cry, I probably wouldn't have been very good at it.
No. I mean, the game structure is very much, you have to be into it. You wouldn't survive, Amy, otherwise. I mean, you can hide, but it's the whole any game like the stealth game, it's the tension build up that you enjoy, and I think you'd find that really hard. Again, a brilliant series that is really faithful to the game without being slaved to the game. So we talked about episode 3. I was going to ask you about your standout moments in the series, but I think we can all agree that episode 3 was just, I think, probably the peak of the series in some respects. Although the grill house scene was pretty interesting as well.
Yeah.
Let's talk about episode 3. So I don't think you got to this part in the game, Bobby. So there's a sequence in the game where Joel and Ellie have to they need to get somewhere by a vehicle, and they need a battery for a car. And the battery is mentioned at the beginning of this series when they're talking to Marlene in the QZ at the beginning when they first meet Ellie. And in the game, they have to go through this town that's completely wired up for traps. And so part of the game sequence is you've got to get through all these different tripwires, and you have to climb across a lot of rooftops. And eventually you get to Bill's house in this town. And Bill is in there on his own with his his preppers set up with all his cameras and his traps. And basically Joel and Ellie and Bill find a way of breaking out with a 4x4, which Ellie and Joel can then drive to the next sequence. And in the game, there is no Frank, although there is, if you wander around a bit and find objects on tables, there's a letter written by Frank to Bill, telling him basically they've fallen out and he's walked out basically and left him. And eventually you find a kind of quite a desiccated body of Frank, who's hung himself alone in a house.
Right.
So that's quite different to what happened, and we ought to really have some sort of trigger warning here on the podcast. So, this is quite. We're going to be talking about suicide for the next 20 minutes. So if it's something that you don't want to listen to, do fast forward. So the story in the series was such an improvement on the game story. It was, as you said before, Amy, about sort of character build up. What did they do here that made it really, really affecting? Alex, what do you think? What really gripped you? And how did they work this out? The emotion kicked in for you? Because I know I cried my eyes out at the end of this. I mean, proper ugly sobs in this episode.
Yeah, I think it's unusual for a TV series to dedicate an entire episode to 2 characters. And what I liked is that they took it from the start all the way to the finish. Like, you didn't jump in, you didn't have to make any guesses. They took you straight from when they met all the way through. And I think that helped a lot. I think it kind of gave you an idea of the perspectives between Bill, very conservative, and Frank, and how they came together as well. It was just like really honest, but in terms of the relationship and the people and the flaws, and I think that was the piece. You didn't have to go into any of that detail normally, because it's not relevant normally to the story, and they made it relevant, and then because they made it relevant, it paid off so much at the end. So I think that was why it was such a powerful episode.
Bobby, any thoughts on the episode?
I don't know how much I'll be able to talk about it because I've already had water leaking out of my eyes. I think there's some dust in here.
There's some smoke in there, I think.
Suddenly getting allergic to
onions.
Exactly. I think it hit home for so many people because it was just such a human story, and it got you thinking about your own situation and the people or the person that you love and what you go through. And Alex is right that the fact they took it from the very, very beginning of when they first met to the very end, just you're gonna have to go to Amy because I can't. It was
Amy, any thoughts? Help Bobby out.
It was beautiful.
He weeps quietly into his microphone. Bless him.
It was absolutely beautiful as an episode, and I really enjoyed it. It's one of those things that they didn't even need to do it. They could have just gone to the house and taken it.
Yeah.
And off they go. We would never have needed to know that story. But I think everyone is so glad that we do. And it showed that a love that's just so... It's simple. It's not all great, big, grand gestures. It's the simple love that most of us have, and we're very lucky to have. I thought it was wonderful. And another little idea that came from it is that ultimately Joel and Ellie went and got a battery. And they had to freshen up in the house. And then off they went. And it reminds you that actually every single thing that happens in that story, every single item in the game that you pick up, every single person you come across, every carcass, everything, there's a life behind it and a story and maybe a little bit of love. And we completely forget that. We take it for granted because it's a medipack. It doesn't matter how the medipack got there. And actually it brings you out of the game and into a bit more of real life, and makes you really, really appreciate all the things that were left for them.
So the theme of this series is love, and if you look, it starts off with the love of Joel as a father to his daughter, and then he loses her, and then he kind of rekindles that love with Ellie over a long time. But it's also the love between him and Tess, and he loses Tess, and he lost his daughter, and he's scared of losing Ellie. But you've got the love between Bill and Frank, and the kind of a mirrored relationship of Henry and Sam. They're almost kind of a reflection of Ellie and Joel. And so, although it is a zombie series, which is not really at all, the theme here is love, and also how really the people are the monsters rather than the monsters. And I think that's what's just so. It sits on such a good story. Such the backbone of this narrative that was the game is so good. That there's so much they can develop, and I think it was a really, really good homage to the character from the game. It's. I think it's going to win a lot of awards this series.
I think the way that episode ended, was I think that broke everybody.
Yeah. I don't think it's. I mean, I'm going to be interested to see my wife and see how she reacts to it. Yeah, I'm starting to well up a bit now as well.
How do you think it compared with... Because the other standout episode for me was episode 8, which was... that was the one where there's the cannibals.
Yeah.
And the bar scene, like you said.
It was the scene where eventually Ellie leaves the bar and runs into Joel's arms, and suddenly that's when the relationship changes and there's acceptance of a father-daughter relationship, isn't there? Really, he calls her my baby girl, which he's never said since Sarah. No. I mean, it's when they walked into that, or when she walked into that village, and you saw that grill house, because I knew that building from the game and knew what happened, my guts wrenched when I saw that. I thought, oh my God, they're actually going to show this scene.
Right.
I mean, It's harder for, well, we're all parents here in some respect, whether it's with children or with animals. You know, we all have little creatures that we care for. And I think we are a demographic that are very much affected by this series. But that scene in the grill house was a hard scene to watch. It's a bit harder in the game because it's a bit more drawn out. But Amy, what your from your more your female point of view, which is an interesting perspective for this scene. What were your thoughts on this scene?
I hated it, which is exactly what they wanted.
Yeah.
It was the way it played out was very well done, and it was chilling, absolutely chilling, and horrible and horrifying, and it made my skin crawl, and I just wanted to pull Ellie out of the situation. Which actually, a big shout out to the original game story designers, because having seen side-by-side shots, I can see how incredibly truthful it was to the game, which goes to show you how much work and time they put into getting that right.
Yeah.
Just for the game.
I mean, in the game, you can't get out. There's no. Essentially, David is treated as a boss, so you can't leave until you can't run away. You can't just go out the door and forget the scene. You have to progress through it because the narrative relied on her change in her life.
And actually, in a lot of those situations in the real world, life art.
Yeah.
That's quite reflective of trigger warning, abusive relationships.
Yeah. It's there are some hard scenes in this series, but I think it's better for it because it really does, as you say, it makes these characters so three-dimensional. Any other thoughts on that episode 8 scene, Alex and Bobby?
I think it just, again highlights what the series just did so well, but it's not a zombie series, it's the real monsters. When you get infected, you got no control over that. It's just animal impulse, right? They eat brains, or I don't even know what they do.
Vegetable impulse, really. Fungus impulse.
Vegetable, fungus impulse, whatever. I mean, it's the most extreme reaction to taking magic mushrooms that I've ever heard of. But not that I've ever done that stuff. But I'd like to, though. But the real monsters are humans, us. And at every turn, at every settlement they arrive at, or abandoned town, and there's some other survivors around, or the woman from Will and Grace, who was absolutely freaking terrifying.
The woman from Will and Grace.
Yeah, Darlene.
Oh my God, is that her?
No, she looked very much
she's
like
a Kiwi,
her,
isn't she?
but it's a different person.
I was going to say, yeah.
Oh.
She's a New
looked
Zealand
an
actress.
awful lot like her.
Yeah.
Totally looked
Kathleen,
like her.
you mean, Bobby?
Yeah.
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 They don't worry about the fungus infected people. It's the non-infected that you need to worry about more, because they're actually the most terrifying.
In the game, when they go to this part of the world for the next sequence, there's a lot of them wandering around the streets with people driving past in vehicles, or because in fact in the game you go and it's Fedra chasing you around, not the people. In the TV series, Fedra have been overthrown by this group in their QZ, in the quarantine zone. So again, this is a very good example of them fleshing out the world and making the situation they're in more interesting. So you don't get any background. It's a lot of crawling around with these kind of just NPCs wandering around chasing you. So Kathleen's not in the game, but again, I quite liked how they kind of positioned that with Sam and his brother having killed her brother. That put more weight on those two characters' roles as well.
But they humanised it, didn't they? It wasn't just an anonymous organisation. It was, people, but normal people, flawed people, who ended up making bad decisions.
Let's talk about. I'm going to jump ahead. We'll talk about the production of the series in a second, but let's look at the characters. Look at the actors. How do we? Bobby mentioned Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey. I agree with you, Bobby. Initially, I was a little bit. See, Ellie and Joel in the game, I spent a lot of time with them, many hours. So I was a little bit cautious about how it would work with these actors. But personally, I thought they filled the roles completely. What are your feelings on that relationship between the two actors? Amy?
In terms of the TV show, I thought it was absolutely brilliant because they played through kind of getting to know each other, not liking each other, annoying each other, being fed up by each other, but also wanting to protect each other, and then being there for each other. I thought it was really interesting to see that develop.
Alex?
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. I think it's hard to fault it, to be honest. She plays an annoying teenager really well, and he plays a kind of broken dad and broken person well as well. So it kind of works really nicely.
I mean, Joel can handle himself, can't he?
Yeah.
I think it at some point in the series, I can't remember if it was him as well, but he talks about Tommy, his brother, being a soldier in, is it the Iraq War?
I'm not sure.
One of the
the Gulf.
The Gulf War, and I'm pretty sure.
Or was it Afghanistan?
I can't remember now, but I'm pretty sure that Joel may have gone out there with him to basically protect his brother, and so I think he has served, which explains his usefulness with his, with the guns and his general kind of approach to combat. Bobby, how about you? How did you feel about this relationship?
I think it developed really nicely, and they actually took you along for that ride as well, because Ellie at the beginning, because we didn't know her backstory. We knew Joel, where what he'd been through, and why he was the way he was, but we didn't know hers, and she just it was very easy to forget very often that she's a child, because she's so mouthy. Girl after my own heart. Was she more mouthy than Ellie in the game?
No, there's a lot of swearing in the game too.
Oh, okay.
And
maybe because the game character, the sprite has got maybe softer features and stuff. But and then to see, as we get more of her backstory eventually, but then also you see the relationship between the two of them develop. It goes from being, he's been tasked with this job of getting her from one place to the other, so he's kind of just got to get on and do it, and she's been lumped with him, so she hasn't really got much choice either. To then, when you get to the bit where he gets injured gravely, and then you really see what he means to her, what he's become to her.
She can't leave him, can she? He tells her to go and leave him, but she can't do that.
I just thought they were brilliant, and I thought, both actors they were magnificent. I really hope they get
the recognition,
tons of recognition, because they deserve it. They really, really do. I've loved Pedro Pascal, ever since I first saw him in Narcos. I always thought he was brilliant, absolutely brilliant actor, and I thought in the end he did a really, really good job with his version of Joel.
Yeah, which is
really
slightly
good.
More Hispanic, isn't it? He's kind of a Hispanic version of Joel, which is why the actor who plays Tommy, who I think is Gabriel Luna, who I think is Diego Luna's brother, they work so well together. If you get the TV series, if you buy it on streaming, you get a lot of extra content, and some of that content is, I think, which was put onto the social networks, on the Instagram and TikTok, is a lot of Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey chatting and just hanging out, and they've definitely cemented a really good relationship. They're very, very friendly. They have lots of jokes, and they're very relaxed with each other. They filmed this during the pandemic. This was filmed during lockdown, so there were limitations. He first met Bella Ramsey on set, not before the series, but you can tell from just the way they talk to each other and the way they kind of riff off each other, there's a really good relationship there, and that definitely comes through in the series. I agree with you, Bob. I think awards should be given to the series. Speaking of which, one of the things I have watched, but is sort of a half an hour behind the scenes, is in terms of the production of the show. Now, I don't know how much you're aware of this, but a lot of what you see there is practical. and the township, the villages they go to. For instance, Bill and Frank's, that cul-de-sac of all the houses.
Mm-hmm.
That was all completely built from scratch by the sets, and a lot of the, the farm, the area towards the end where the community with the cinema screen and Maria, the mother of Sarah. That was all in one street, and they built a whole lot of extra buildings there, and I think it works really well. What were your general thoughts on the look of the show and the production of the show in terms of the backgrounds and this, the feel of the show, Amy?
It just felt so real, and so I wasn't aware of that. I kind of assumed that there'd be some CGI, but it sounds like they really lessened that. I guess they saved CGI for some of the more jarring movements and gory bits, but it was just so real.
There are some of the scenes that when they're travelling through the general landscape, and you see a lot of these sort of disused tanks, and then that plane crash on the hill, and when it pans back over and you see a lot of rundown, they have dressed up the wider scenes with special effects to make it look post-apocalyptic.
I love that they went the extra mile and they did not CGI the giraffe.
No. So
that's lovely.
To the giraffe scene, they were very, very cautious about removing that because it was such an iconic scene in the game, which I don't think Alex or Bobby have come to yet in the game. It's one of my... In fact, when I wrote an article for a games journal magazine a while back, and it's something I mentioned in that. But what they did with that was the giraffe, where it was stabled, they painted the stable completely blue and got the giraffe used to the blue screen feel of its surroundings. And then when they filmed it, it's one of the very few scenes where everything in that scene, apart from Bella Ramsey and Pedro and the giraffe, was CGI. None of that was around, and none of that foliage was there. So the giraffe came into the room with the blue screen and was used to its surroundings because it's just like a stable, and it didn't react at all. But yeah, Pedro Pascal was saying how it was very easy to act because there was so much you could see around you. A lot of these like the Mandalorian, he's very much having to act to nothing.
Well, he can barely see it anyway in that helmet.
It's true.
So.
Bobby, having played some of the games, especially the early scenes where they're walking through the cities, like the one behind me in my background, where there's a lot of buildings falling over, I just felt like it was so accurate to the game without it being video graphics. It was so well done. What are your thoughts on the production of the other series? Does anything stand out to you at all that you really thought, oh my God, look at that, that's amazing?
Sorry, me?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. The whole thing looked bloody incredible. I didn't know if it was CGI or if it was practical because I was looking at it, I was like, it looks practical.
Yeah.
But I didn't know if it looks so good because they were using that wraparound technology or not, or
no,
if
they didn't
it
use
was
any volume technology at all.
Yeah, it was stunning. So I just echo what Amy said. Alex, I like the fact that it was mostly practical as well, with a little bit of light touching up to probably do all the fungal effects and stuff like that.
So basically they went to a lot of locations. They had a location manager that looked at the game and looked at various cities around. In fact, some of the cities in the game were used as locations, but not all of them. But the scenes in the snow with David in particular. So they found this place. I can't remember where it was now. I have to look it up. But they wanted to find somewhere that had reliable snow for that scene. When they got there, there was plenty of snow on the ground, in the fields and so on, but a lot of the roads had been cleared, and it was meant to be a very snowy season, but there was no snow falling. So they spent 3 days with 350 dumper trucks, 3 days, hundreds of the production team shoveling the snow from the hills, bringing that snow down and just redistributing it around the town where they filmed it to make it look more snowy. And the afternoon they finished bringing all the snow in, heavy snowfall started. Can you imagine having done something similar with sand myself? Can you imagine just how they felt after spending 3 days doing that work and then it snowed really heavily? I just think that attention to detail. Tess was saying, the actor Anna Torv, she was saying how the sets were so accurate that they were using little sesame seeds to look like droppings on the ground, all the way up to the scale of these cities behind them. So there's obviously a lot of love for the series.
And they were filming.
Alex, any thoughts?
They were filming for 4K, weren't they, as well?
Yeah.
So they had to put that level of detail in. No, I think the locations themselves were just really well done, and I think that's what grounded you in it. They did a lot of the filming in Alberta in Canada. They used it for places like Kansas City, so they doubled for Kansas City. They used Calgary, and a lot of filming around Calgary and Edmonton. And honestly, like they're great cities anyway, so it kind of really grounded you. And I just loved the scenery. Like it, I love Canada as a country anyway. I just think it's a beautiful country. Part of me has this view of, like, you know, going across Canada at some point in a pickup truck or something like that, something really Northern American. But yeah, and it just sort of reinforced all of that in a really nice way. So I just loved that. And what was nice is it still had the time to go into detail. So you had, you know, really quiet, sensitive moments with like wildlife, for example, like the deer. And it's, again, those are things that could easily have been ignored in a zombie film, and they weren't. And I think that's what made it so powerful.
The deer scene is actually quite a pivotal scene in the game as well. But I'll let you get to that when you do that. Okay, I hate to say it, but were there any criticisms of the show? Was there anything that you think could have been done better or should have been left out? I can see everyone shaking their heads here. Is there anything, Amy, as a kind of a newcomer to the whole franchise?
I think the only thing at all that I felt was lacking was the ending.
Ah, interesting.
Because for me, I wanted the ending to be more of a, well, come on then, let's go. Rather than a, right, what are we doing? Yeah, all right. And so for me, I think I remember saying to Alex, is that it? What was that the end? Is there another bit? Or is that literally just it?
So the ending of the series is exactly word for word and shot for shot the same as the game. And it really, really split opinion at the end of the game. Now, I think it's absolutely perfect because there's so much underlying unsaid emotion and feelings going on in that scene. What were your thoughts, Alex and Bobby? Alex, what were your thoughts on the ending?
So was he right to murder everyone for one person? And I think the challenge is if it's your daughter, then the answer is probably yes, but it's a dark decision to make, isn't it?
Bobby, what are your thoughts on this?
I'm right. He was right to murder everyone. They, without a second thought, were going to cut that little girl's head open and take her brain out and cut it up. So, you know, they didn't deserve to live. I'd have gone in there and machine gunned them all down.
But it's
and
an
also, we
decision.
needed.
Yeah.
Also,
because
no, it's
it
not
was
an
going to be chopping it. Well, it'd be chopping into her brain, which we don't want because we love her. Yeah. We love her, but to save humanity.
No, because humanity doesn't deserve saving. If you have to lose your humanity in order to save humanity, then no, that doesn't work for me. And also, we needed that big action set piece where we could see what Joel is capable of, because we hadn't really seen that before.
What do you think is going to happen in Series 2 when because obviously for
I know what's going to happen
for Ellie. So do I. I've played the second game. What do you think? I mean, for Ellie, her purpose in life, her one thing, was to go to this hospital with the Fireflies and save humanity. What do you think could happen if she finds out that Joel lied to her? because he did. He lied to her at the end, obviously. Now,
Oh, yeah.
whether we think we know, because I think one of the real lovely aspects of that final scene, which is, Amy, I'm trying to help you understand why I liked it so much, was I'm pretty sure the way it was played was Ellie knew he was lying.
Yeah.
And also I think Joel knew that Ellie knew. But she still had to ask him, and he still had to respond in that way. So it's a really multi-layered scene, I think, in terms of the characters' kind of feelings and emotions.
That's interesting, because that brings into the world two things that really juxtaposition.
Yeah.
It brings in absolute trust in the, do you know what? I'm aware that you have killed all these people, but I understand why you did that, and I trust you.
Yeah.
And complete distrust that he will just lie to her face.
Yeah.
For whatever the reasons are behind it. So that could lead to interesting things like her saying, do you know what, I've had enough of this. I've had enough of you telling lies about this because you told me a lie about that and I knew it was a lie, and now I'm going to go off and do my own thing for an episode and a half, and it will probably go wrong and you'll need to come and save me. But that's where it could go. And that's from someone who has not played the game and has not looked into it.
So a lot of people who listen to this podcast who are gamers will know exactly what happens in the second season and the second game. Bobby, we mustn't say anything.
Is it fair to say it won't end well? like
all I can say is that Druckmann, who wrote both games, he reminds me a bit of the writers of the Game of Thrones in that they're always trying to play with expectation. You know, you weren't expecting Sam's brother to shoot himself when he did, and I think there's lots going on to speculate about, but I think the second season is going to be very interesting. Now, there was some concerns that they were going to replace Bella Ramsey with someone else. I think that has been now unconfirmed, that they are going to keep her for a second season as well, because she actually is now the same age as Ellie will be in the second season. That's all I can say, really, because it's set a few years after the first season.
Which makes sense, because it's like they could make her out to be that little bit older, and then that would suit it better.
Yeah. I mean, she was playing over her age in this season.
Yeah.
In that final scene where they're coming over the brow of the hill and you can see the town ahead of them, that's the town where Tommy's living.
Right.
So they're returning to Tommy's town, basically Tommy Town. So I think that's where the next season will start, from that town there, maybe a few years later.
And the fact it's a few years later opens us up to so many things, because so many things could have developed in so many ways. So that will be really interesting to investigate. Yeah.
Now, the episode where we have that flashback of Ellie back at her time at the school and the QZ, and with Riley and the arcade, the closed down arcade. So, Bobby and Alex, if you get a chance to play the game, if you have the DLC, that episode is based on the DLC Left Behind.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is brilliant, really, really good. And you find out a little bit more about what happens to Riley at the end of that. So play that. I wonder if we'll see more flashbacks like that as well, because the one thing that and again we haven't even mentioned, is it Craig Manzin, who's the main writer of the series? I mean, obviously. Neil Druckmann, he had the initial ideas, but Craig Manzin did most of the kind of series writing and a lot of the background footage and how-tos have him as the kind of the presenter. He himself, I mean, he is so central to the series, and he was saying how accommodating Druckmann was to the changing of story. And having seen how the second game was received, again, opinion was quite split about the second game. I'm really fascinated to see what they do with that second season and how they diverge from the game. So very, very exciting. I would imagine the production values will be even higher. They can be a bit more confident, and also because it's not going to be filmed during a pandemic, we should see a little bit more. I don't know. Maybe it'll be an easier process to film, and therefore, again, even more exacting standards in production. But any other thoughts about this series before we sign off today? Amy?
We missed out one little thing
of
love. Someone's first kiss.
Oh, yeah.
We were in a really privileged position to see Ellie's first kiss, and I just adored that wonder
Yeah.
that kind of surprise and that tingle. I loved that.
But also just the bitterness of the fact that as soon as they've kissed, the clickers came running in,
Yeah.
and the realization, because at the time she thought that she was also going to die, didn't she? I really loved how they brought that into the series from the game, and I really loved how it explained how she got the bite at the beginning of it, from episode 1. And Amy says something about Sweet Tooth as well.
Yeah. So at the same time that I've been watching Last of Us,
Yeah.
I was watching a couple of other things. I had a bit of spare time, so I was watching American Horror Story, and I was watching this other fantastic series on Netflix called Sweet Tooth.
Is that the one with the antlers and
Yeah.
the promo?
Yeah. So it's basically a kid who's got antlers, and it's based about some sort of virus that
Yeah.
takes over the world, and if you get it, people will basically wrap you in saran wrap and set fire to your house because they don't want it to spread. And
Blimey.
I spotted so many little parallels between Sweet Tooth and Last of Us. So if people have enjoyed Last of Us and they want something that's a little bit lighter, because I think it's rated like PG-12 or something,
Sure.
it's worth a look to see another different but similar situation of a terrifying landscape.
I just want to say that seeing Ellie's first kiss was far less cringe than when we saw Arya Stark's losing her virginity thing in Game of Thrones, because that was so weird. That was like watching your little niece who you've seen grow up, and then suddenly, for some reason, your face is being held and you're being made to stare as she, boff someone.
It's a bit.
That was. Yeah, sorry, Amy mentioning that just reminded me of that, which I didn't want to be reminded of again, because I was very fond of that character, and then I was disappointed.
You just ruined the word boff for me, so...
Well, you've not been part of the Bondathons, and that is John Evans' fault, Amy.
Well, I say Bond,
but I have
generally.
He now has his Bond boffometer,
yeah, I do,
where he counts the boffs in.
I have been tuning in, and we have just mentioned tailoring talk, so I'm going to take a drink.
Yes, she does listen. Well done. I'm going to sign off just by letting people know that at the end of March, in a first of its kind case, a plant mycologist from India contracted a fungal disease which caused flu-like symptoms, and apparently it was a case of cordyceps that he contracted. So a little bit worrying that he's fine, by the way. The man is fine now, and the infection hasn't returned. But it does show you how much of a basis of reality that they use this idea of the fungal infections. And we didn't mention John Hannah at the beginning of the season, but I really, really loved the extra detail they put into the intro, that sort of 60s talk show.
He was good, wasn't he?
And also the scientist in Indonesia who basically said, "What do we do? What do we do? How can we solve this?" And she says, "Bomb everything." And that, I'm getting goosebumps now just thinking about that scene. Well, very much all of us are looking forward to season 2. This is an excellent series. Everyone who's listened to this will know this because they've seen it. Long may it last. And I'm hoping that perhaps they go beyond this with maybe extra characters and spin-offs. Who knows? Thank you so much for listening. Do we want to mention the socials before we go? Is everyone bothered about their socials? Let's talk about it, shall we? So you can listen to us online at playpausturn.show. You can find myself on Mastodon at John PR Evans at mstdn.social. Alex, where can we find you?
Alex Hansford at twit.social on Mastodon.
And Amy, are you on Mastodon? You are, aren't you?
I am, but I do you know what? I just don't use it very much anymore, so I wouldn't bother looking there because you're not going to find very much that's reasonably up to date.
And Bobby,
find me here at Play Paul's Turn.
Exactly. Bobby's on Instagram, and he's got some amazing Instagrams at the moment. These things are going a bit crazy, aren't they, Bobby? They're going a bit viral. Was it about 18,000 views or something ridiculous last time you looked for one of them?
Yeah, it depends. I can't. The Instagram algorithm is doing my head in, but because it depends on the time of day I post. But I have now switched to doing how-to educational.
They're really good
style-related little shorts that are less than 60 seconds. So if you're interested in any of that, then you can find me at Roberto Rivilla London.
And I think that's it, isn't it?
And also check out podcast Taylor and Talk.
Oh yes, of course.
Take a drink.
Take a drink. Oh, okay. Well, this has been Play Pause Turn, and thank you for listening.
So one thing I didn't mention is that Carolina, every week, she would say, "Do we have another The Last One of Us available?"
Oh, bless.
And we're like, "It's not The Last One of Us, it's The Last of Us." And she'd be like, "That makes no sense. It's The Last One of Us." And I'm like, what where did you get from there to there? And she's like, because eventually there will only be The Last One of Us.
No, that's Highlander.
It's The Last One of Us.
That's Highlander, I think, if you're thinking of.
That's probably what's crept into her brain. The Last One of Us. But now she just does it just to piss me off.
Piss you off, yeah.